Hello, welcome to the Capital Employed podcast. For this episode, I had the pleasure of talking to Craig Martin. Craig is the chairman of Dynam Capital and investment manager of Vietnam Holdings. Vietnam Holdings is a closed-end investment fund listed on the London Stock Exchange, and as the name suggests, invest in the country of Vietnam. Full disclosure, I hold shares in Vietnam Holdings. I think Vietnam is a great growth opportunity for this decade. For this reason, it was a real pleasure listening to Craig talk about the opportunity Vietnam presents, his own experiences of the country, as well as diving deeper into some of the stocks held within the fund. So without further interruption, please enjoy my conversation with Craig. Hi Craig, thank you for coming on to the podcast.
Pleasure, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Can you tell me what and who is Vietnam Holding?
Sure. Firstly, myself, Craig Martin, I'm chairman of a firm called Dynam Capital. We're a Guernsey-regulated fund manager, and we're responsible for managing Vietnam Holding. So, as you say, what is Vietnam Holding? It's an investment company. It's listed on the main board of the London Stock Exchange under the ticker VNH.L. It's got a market cap of about £100 million at an attractive discount of about 20% to the net value of the assets in the fund. So it's a closed-ended fund and invests in the exciting markets of Vietnam. It's been going about 14 years, and Dynam Capital has been the manager for the last 3 years. And it's a fund that has a portfolio of about 25 good Vietnamese companies. And as the fund was a very early signatory of the United Nations Principles of Responsible Investing, the fund has had over a decade of responsible investing in Vietnam. So that's what Vietnam Holding is all about.
And why invest in Vietnam? What makes the country such a compelling opportunity?
Well, there are many points to that. And I've had the privilege of being involved in Vietnam over the last 3 decades. I would say the first really is the people. Almost all 100 million of them. They're a very hardworking people and driven to perhaps better themselves. In some surveys, last year or so, the Vietnamese people responded saying they believe they are better off than their parents and that their children will be better off than themselves, which is somewhat of an inverse of perhaps if you ask that question in more Western countries. And at heart, the people are capitalist entrepreneurs. Although the country is a socialist country with a communist kind of heritage over the last century, it's capitalist entrepreneurs at heart, very optimistic about the future, traditional in values, and cohesive as a society. And many rags to riches stories. Years ago, I invested in a company in Vietnam making animal feed. Its founder had started out dirt poor. I think he was a bicycle rickshaw driver looking for customers in front of the cathedral in Ho Chi Minh City. He then started a business making feed for pigs and grew it into a business generating about probably $3 million of profit a year when I first invested, and provided him with much needed expansion capital. He then went on to grow the business to make $50 million of profit a year, and now is pretty much retired. So that there are great success stories of entrepreneurs, that capitalist mentality succeeding in Vietnam. So the first one I would say is the people. The second would probably be the country, very richly endowed with natural resources, and a kind of strategic location in the heart of Asia. And with that, actually a very strong government that's able to take on challenges and win. For many people, when they think of Vietnam, they're more familiar perhaps with the history of Vietnam, looking through the lens of the American War of the 1960s and the early 1970s. And if we cast our minds back then, it was almost unknown for a superpower like the US to be defeated by a small emerging nation. But don't forget, Vietnam had defeated the French 20 years before that, and the Chinese about 1,000 years before that as well. So the people are stoic and nationalistic. And if you fast forward to last year, to 2019, and the war of COVID, Vietnamese really brought out their A team, strong, effective tracking and lockdown, implementing quarantine measures, as well as really, recognizing you need to do some social distancing and encouraging mask wearing. And this, of course, was a time when people in the West were laughing at, and sadly, in one case in London, attacking Asians who were wearing masks. So Vietnam was able to get a strong grip on COVID, and as a country, it emerged with one of the highest levels of GDP growth in the world. So the country would be the second, the people the first, the country the second. And if we look at the third, would be the economy. The macro environment in Vietnam is favorable. Very strong levels of foreign direct investment, leading to high levels of foreign reserves, and that's also backed up by record levels of trade surplus. Vietnam is very much an open economy and trades with the world. It has many bilateral and multilateral agreements in place over the years. And actually last year we saw a rash of new deals, one with the EU, the European Union Free Trade Agreement signed in August, one with the UK just sneaked in before the UK's Brexit deadline at the end of last year. And also, very importantly, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership was signed in Vietnam. So, the country is very much open for trade in that regard. So the economy is on a strong clip, high growth last year, and this year looking at maybe 6 to as much as 8% GDP growth, which is it's kind of historical average over the last 30 years. So really a growing economy. And then lastly, I would say the opportunity for Vietnam is the time. The last 25 years have seen tremendous growth in the economy, and now Vietnam is really at the cusp of acceleration, perhaps a bit like China a few years ago. As I mentioned, I've been involved in Vietnam for almost 30 years, and when I visited as a tourist more than 28 years ago, I would sit in a little coffee shop and take pictures of the Vietnamese sitting outside with their funny conical hats on and watch the flowing ao dai, the silken dresses on the people going by on their bicycles. So fast forward 25 years. It's the Vietnamese are the customers of the modern coffee shops and bars. They're fashionably dressed. They're inside, sensibly away from the heat, perhaps taking selfies of their lattes and their designer drinks. And now it's the foreign tourists who are sitting outside the cafes on the small little red plastic chairs, taking selfies of themselves, and they're wearing the funny conical hat. So it's really changed dramatically. And at this point in time, it's the per capita GDP that's really at an important inflection point. It's now about $3,000 per person, which is 3 times what it was when the stock market opened less than 20 years ago. And so the Vietnamese are now entering this domestic consumption phase. And when China hit that level of per capita GDP, it then saw its economy double in less than 5 years. And in the last 12, 18 months, Vietnam has more visibly stepped up to the global stage and has strengthened its kind of positioning as a key location for manufacturing and investment. And over the last year and a half, many companies are looking to relocate to Vietnam. Some of that's in high-tech, PC, tablet, smartphone manufacturing, which obviously is going through a lot of growth when people are working from home because of the pandemic. It's also in software development and outsourcing, as well as those more traditional manufacturing for exports, perhaps in garments, textiles, and aquaculture. So it's a great time to be investing in Vietnam. These 4 pillars are really driving things forward. And in the last 6 months, actually, our fund, Vietnam Holding, has seen its assets grow by almost 50%. So I would say that's why Vietnam and why now.
Through Vietnam Holding, what type of sectors and companies do you mostly focus on?
Well, we approach the opportunities really in 2 ways, a kind of like a top-down and then a bottom-up. So from the top-down, we like 3 main themes. The first of that would be industrialization. So it's a modernizing economy benefiting from this foreign direct investment trend over the last 25, 30 years, and the linkages, the business-to-business services as part of that industrialization theme. The second theme would be urbanization, as people are getting wealthier and looking to move into their own flats and houses, and want to shop in modern shopping environments. That whole urbanization, which leads into better infrastructure, demands for cleaner water, cleaner energy in more recent times. And then the third leg would be the domestic consumer, that growth in and consumerism. And of course, all of these are also underpinned by financial services, banks. So we look at those as well from the kind of top-down themes. And then when we look at the bottom-up angle, we're really looking at companies that can compound their earnings at high rates over the next 3 or 5 years. And very importantly, we're looking at businesses that we as the investment manager can engage with. We've got a team on the ground in Vietnam, and so we can engage in a very authentic way with the owners and management of these businesses across the themes of strong ESG, environmental social governance, that the fund has been focused on for over a decade. So it's that kind of top-down themes and then the bottom-up looking for great companies, good businesses to invest in that are part of that theme.
And the fund is quite concentrated. Am I right in saying it's about 25 companies in the fund?
Yes, that's right. So we are concentrated intentionally because we want to be engaged with the businesses. And so we don't want 60 companies because then it's very hard to kind of monitor and actively be involved in those businesses. So across those three main themes of industrialization, urbanization, and domestic consumer, underpinned by that banking sector, we've got about 25, 26 names, many of which we've held for a long time, and we're actively involved in monitoring those businesses. And we will add new names. We're a closed-end fund, so we have to sell something to buy something. So we do take profit when those businesses have done their great job of compounding. We're not too scared to exit and put money into a new name or into a new business.
And can you talk us through two of the companies in your portfolio that you feel have really good long-term potential? What's the thesis for investing in those companies?
Yeah, sure. Look, I say within our portfolio, about 25 companies across those themes. There's perhaps two as an example. One, which is our biggest position, FPT. FPT kind of exhibits a number of characteristics across the themes we like. It's a leading technology and telecoms company. It has a business which is also involved in domestic education. They educate thousands of over 50,000 learners in Vietnam about IT and technology. That's one of the legs of their business. They're a domestic broadband and pay TV company, so that's playing to the growth and the demand from Vietnam's domestic consumers and also businesses that need to be connected and digitalized within Vietnam. And then the third business is they provide outsourced software services to Japanese companies and US Fortune 500 companies, a bit like a number of the Indian outsourcers 20 years ago, the Wipros and the Infosys and the Tata kind of companies in India. FPT has really carved out a strong position in that in Vietnam. So it's a significant player, top 3 player in broadband, very significant player in the offshore or outsourcing business in technology. So fantastic growth. Last year was a fantastic year for it as well. It really came into its own during COVID as well. It was seen as a very defensive stock. It helped businesses digitalize. It helped a number of companies in Vietnam, including our other portfolio companies, deliver their AGMs through online means and electronic means. And it's a good growth story. So last 3 years, probably 15% to 20% compound annual growth in earnings. And yet modest in terms of valuation, 10 times price earnings. So we like it a lot. We've been an active investor in FPT. We took some profit last year. It's one of the businesses that there's a queue of foreign investors wanting to buy this stock. And because this stock is involved in technology and telecommunications, it's one of the companies in Vietnam that's on a kind of restricted list. Foreigners can't own more than 49% of the stock. And so foreigners will bid at a high premium to own this business. So we took some profit last year. We managed to sell some of our position at a close to 50% premium to the price that we have it listed in the fund's net asset value. So a very good business, and it's delivered well for the fund and continues to be our number one position. So that's FPT Corporation. The second one, which has also had a very strong 2020, is Hua Fat Group. So unlike FPT, which is in technology and education and digitalization, Hua Fat Group's in a very much more traditional business. It's a steel maker. It's the largest manufacturer of construction steel in Vietnam. And as you recall, that the theme of industrialization and urbanization, a lot of that is involved around infrastructure and kind of housing. And so clearly, as Vietnam grows, the demand for steel has been very dramatic growth. What Hua Fat has done over the last few years, it's become a fully integrated player. It acquired a very large business that it started to bring onto operation. So it can integrate all of the process from the raw materials coming in at one end and finished reinforced steel bar and other steel pipes and other steel components coming out the other end. So it's got great market share, probably about 35% market share. And his earnings growth in 2020 were close to 30% and looking at strong earnings growth as well into 2021. That said, it's still not an expensive company. Price earnings ratio probably also single digit, 10 times and a little bit less than that. So a business that's got a strong market position and good earnings growth. So they're two of our businesses, and they perform very well for us. And as I've mentioned, in the last 6 months, the fund's net asset value has probably risen by more than 50%. And both of these companies have been contributing factors to that. And in the last month, actually, out of our 25 companies, 23 companies were all positive growers, and we only had 2 that saw small declines. So we're fortunately well placed with a strong portfolio. But as you say, a concentrated portfolio. So we have to have belief. We're not an index player. We're an active investor. And we have to keep a close eye on each of our portfolio companies for changes in their market conditions and to find things that other people aren't seeing and that we think are positives for those businesses.
The overall valuation looks very good as well when you compare it to the valuation of, say, like the American stock markets.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the interesting thing, so for Vietnam as a whole, good growth and the stock market valuation is probably looking now, the market's rallied a lot in the last month or so, probably on a 2021 forward price earnings ratio of about 14 times, which is okay. That's not overvalued, but that's supported by the growth. So we're looking at 20% plus earnings per share growth from most companies in our portfolio, certainly. And actually, in our portfolio, our price earnings is lower. So we're probably at a 10 times PE, and yet we've got a 20 times or 20% earnings growth. And that's in the net asset value of the fund. And then you look at the fund itself, which is listed in London, and it trades at a discount of 20% to the net asset value. So, I think both that the market offers value, and certainly I would think that the fund at that level of discount offers value to people that perhaps want to deploy some money into the Vietnamese stock market.
If people want to learn more about Vietnam Holdings, where can they go?
Well, there's a number of ways. We're very open and engaged. They can always email us or email me, craig@dynamcapital.com. Probably the best place to go would be to the fund's website, www.vietnamholding.com. There's lots of information on the fund and on Vietnam and all of our kind of corporate information and fact sheets. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and sign up through the website for our monthly fact sheets, where we update on the performance of Vietnam, the market, and the fund. And we want to be very open and transparent and close to our investors. So we're always happy to tell people more about Vietnam and about Vietnam Holding.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. It's been a pleasure listening to you.
Thank you. No, it's been a real pleasure to join in today.